The President's Answers by Bryce Elliott. Executive privilege. Month after month, Nixon denies any involvement in the Watergate scandal, saying that he is not guilty. President Nixon claims that he does not have to give information to other branches of our government, such as the legislative or the judicial branches. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. The Saturday Night Massacre. The special prosecutor requests for Nixon to hand over all of the conversation tapes. There were about 47 conversation tapes recorded. In return to the prosecutor asking for the tapes, Nixon only offers written summaries. He does not actually release the recorded tapes themselves. Nixon then orders for the Attorney General to remove the special prosecutor from power. In response to Nixon's request, both the Attorney General and his top assistant resign. The reason that they both resigned was to do the right thing. They knew that Nixon was in the wrong. The dismissal of the special prosecutor sparks the Saturday Night Massacre. Soon, a public uprising began and serious calls about the president's resignation began. October of 1973 was proving to be a very hard time for President Richard Nixon. Moving on to Spiro Agnew's resignation. Spiro Agnew had been found guilty for taking bribes from state contractors. This is a big no-no. Spiro was eventually forced to resign in disgrace, which is what he deserved. A new vice president. Nixon then appoints Gerald Ford as the new vice president. Nixon also appointed another special prosecutor in November of 1973. So, the releasing of the tapes. In April of 1974, Nixon releases only written transcripts of the 47 tape-recorded conversations. When Nixon released the transcripts, they had been very heavily edited. The public's view. The public started to think that the president had been involved in covering up the scandal. And of course, a Google image. Stated by Nixon, I erased 18.5 minutes of the tape. Hillary deleted 30,000 emails. Who's the crook now? Even with the public's views and comments, Nixon still proclaims his innocence. Impeachment. The House of Representatives votes articles of impeachment against 15 top government officials. 12 of the articles of impeachment voted by the House of Representatives were against federal judges. Among the others impeached were Senator William Blount on the left, Vice President Andrew Johnson in the middle, and Secretary of War William Belknap, pictured on the far right. Impeachment and conviction. The Senate actually convicted 7 of the impeached federal judges. They were charged criminally. The tapes and the transcripts. In July, the Supreme Court ruled that Nixon had to turn over the tapes as well as the transcripts. So now the Supreme Court is telling Nixon that he must get rid of the tapes, not just the transcripts. The smoking gun tape. One of these tapes provided direct evidence that on June 23, 1972, Nixon had arranged a cover-up. Nixon's top supporters. With this new information, Nixon's supporters concluded that impeachment was inevitable. The president was almost certain he would be impeached and that the Senate would find him guilty. President Nixon's resignation. On August 8th of 1974, President Nixon announces his resignation on national television. And I do have a quick clip here on Nixon's farewell.
It was 40 years ago today that President Richard Nixon made public the smoking gun, the transcript of a tape recording that showed that he approved the cover-up of the Watergate break-in. 4 days later, Nixon resigned. Today, his presidential library put out Nixon's candid reflections on the scandal, recorded a decade later. Here's Ben Tracy.
I'm a fighter. I just didn't want to quit.
President Richard Nixon nearly 10 years after his historic farewell.
I can remember that hazy, hot, humid August 9th, 40 years ago.
Frank Gannon was one of Nixon's aides. In 1983, he spent 36 hours interviewing the then 70-year-old former president.
What surprised you most about his responses?
I was surprised at how raw, even, he was in expressing feelings and emotions and exposing private things about the family, which he had never talked about before.
Nixon had already decided to resign before the release of the White House tapes, the smoking gun that showed Nixon knew about the Watergate cover-up.
This was the final blow, the final nail in the coffin, although you don't need another nail if you're already in the coffin, which we were.
He told his daughters and a reluctant First Lady Pat Nixon that it was over.
But she came down very emphatically against resigning. She was a fighter to the last.
Nixon later found a note on his pillow from his daughter Julie.
Daddy, I love you. Whatever you do, I will support. Please wait a week or even 10 days before you make this decision. Go through the fire just a little bit longer. You are so strong. I love you.
On August 9th, Richard Nixon signed a one-line letter of resignation and said goodbye.
As the helicopter began to rise, I heard Mrs. Nixon, who was sitting in the seat next to us, speaking to no one in particular, but to everyone. And she said, "It's so sad. It's so sad."
The president says he closed his eyes as the White House faded from view. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Yorba Linda, California.